I'm jumpy. Like I hit the end broadcast button right after I sign off, Evan. And Cecil's like, you're cutting yourself off every time.
Oh, yeah.
You got to be a little more patient. I try to be patient here with the start, and we'll count up here. 3, 2, 1. Who's moving the most on our boards during the preseason? That more this week on the couch. The one and only Evan Silva. Who's moved the most on your board during the preseason?
Well, I'm going to give 2 answers here. The first would be Darrell Henderson. If we're just talking about since the start of, right around the start of training camp, Darrell Henderson went from, RB 45 or RB 50, somewhere in that range, of course, to and he's moved up steadily. I moved him up to RB 24 initially after Cam Akers tore his Achilles. I've got him up to RB 15 at this point, to where he is right on Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's heels, especially after the Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's ankle injury. And he is ahead of guys like Chris Carson, David Montgomery. There is a very big ceiling for Darrell Henderson if everything can come together right for him. You remember he came out, he was a pretty good prospect. I mean, he graduated he left Memphis with as the all-time NCAA leader in yards per carry. I mean, at times he has looked shot out of a cannon in the NFL. I think that he is probably better in the passing game than was Cam Akers. I don't think he's going to have those 24, 25 sort of carry games that Cam Akers probably would have had had he maintained health. But the way that they have treated Darrell Henderson also in the preseason, they've treated him as a locked-in starter. He's not having to compete with anyone. They have not made any moves. I thought that Xavier Jones actually looked pretty darn good in the second week of preseason, and he right now seems to have the stranglehold on the number 2 running back job. But there is no question about Darrell Henderson right now. And so I like, even in some wide receiver or elite tight end heavy builds coming out of the first 5 rounds, if I could get my hands on Darrell Henderson, even as my RB1, and then loading up on pass catchers around him, I don't feel bad about that.
No, it's good because Henderson, you can write in pen in the 4th and get him basically every time. And like you said, he's usually there in the 5th. He might be there in the 6th. And I can get carried away. Evan, the last time I redid my rankings and projections, I started to get a little carried away thinking about what the Rams running game looked like in 2018 and 2017. And I know Todd Gurley, at that time, we were thinking of him as one of the best running backs in the league. But how much of that was the Rams offense? How much of that was what the Rams offense created for him? Because we remember when C.J. Anderson took over, he was a fantasy stud. And then the next year when Henderson got drafted, I remember thinking, well, Gurley's got one foot in the grave. And C.J. Anderson was breaking into the open field. And based on what I saw from Henderson at Memphis, if Henderson gets the open field, he's taking it. He's taking it to the house. But it didn't work out that way where he really became the heir to Gurley because of Akers. But the other side of this equation is now Sean McVay has a quarterback he wants. Now Sean McVay, for the first time, can really run the offense he wants to run, right? I mean, as long as the offensive line holds up. So it could be even better for Darrell Henderson. So you're right. It's easy to get carried away with Henderson. And like you said, he's not going to get what Cam Akers was going to get. That's okay. Look what Nick Chubb is doing in a good offense with the opportunity he gets that he shares with Kareem Hunt. I think J.K. Dobbins could be a guy we look at this way too, which every running back has someone taking at least 20% of the snaps. So it's not so much do you get 60%, 70%, or 75%. I know they say volume's king, but what can you do with it? And what can you do with it in a really good offense like the Rams? Now, something really interesting you said, because we're talking about preseason and how preseason's moving our opinions. I'm seeing a lot of stuff, and I'm the king of overreacting, okay? So I'm not dragging anyone for overreacting, but man, I'm seeing a lot of weight put on preseason usage. And I think you pointed out the most important thing, which is not how are they used in the preseason, but which players are they not using? Because those are your core players, right? It came up on a show I did earlier today with Alex Dunlap, Roster Watch, about guys like Darnell Mooney. You just see the plans they have for players when they're not using them in these first 2 games of the preseason. But tell me, what comes to mind, Evan, if I say, what in your process is actionable in the preseason? What are some of the things that have happened during the preseason that you've at least taken note of and thought, should this make me change my ranking?
Yeah, and I got to go back because I did say I had 2 players that I mentioned. Yeah, so I don't want to go over that. But let me answer your latest question here, though. And I think it's just what you just kind of alluded to. Raheem Mostert is another guy that the 49ers have kept on bubble wrap in bubble wrap, even though I don't think he's dealing with an injury. He's not dealing with an injury, and they've played Trey Sermon a lot. They know what Raheem Mostert can do, and Raheem Mostert has a litany, a long history of sort of nagging little injuries, and has never been a workhorse. Even going back to college, he was not a true workhorse at Purdue, and they know what they have in him, and I think he's going to come out of the gates. And I don't think he's going to be a 20 touch guy, but I think he's going to be maybe a 12 to 15 touch guy and really, really explosive in that role, sharing time with Trey Sermon, and it speaks to their confidence in him and their level of just knowledge of who he is as a player. To keep him on the sidelines and not put him at risk during his preseason games. But the second guy that has risen the most in my ranking since the beginning of training camp, staying on the 49ers, is Trey Lance. I went into training camp with the rhetoric surrounding him from the beat writers, from Kyle Shanahan himself, that it was not likely that he would be an early season starter. And you could justify that based on the fact that he had like 330 dropbacks in his entire college career. He played one game last season, but he's coming from FCS. But he also has this incredible football IQ, and I think he has progressed quickly. Now in the preseason games, it hasn't been he's made big plays, but it hasn't been perfect. I mean, he's taken, I think, 6 sacks on 35 dropbacks. And he has, according to PFF, the most turnover-worthy throws of all the first-round rookie quarterbacks. But you see that big play ability, what he could do. It's a really interesting dynamic, though, because of the schedule for San Francisco, because it's so soft, especially to start out. I mean, they're probably going to be favored by almost a touchdown in each of their first 2 games, I think, against Detroit and Philadelphia. And then if you look at, like, Warren Sharp's strength of schedule, he has it like with like dots, and all the schedules are all kind of like here, and then all of a sudden it's like 49ers are up here because their schedule is so soft. And so usually quarterbacks get pulled, like Jimmy Garoppolo, get pulled when their teams start losing. But are the 49ers going to be losing with a schedule like this? I don't know. I think they need to run him out week 1, let him take his lumps. He is a really smart kid. He's a big kid, and I think the offense it's such a quarterback friendly system. We can go back to RG3, who was lighting it up with Aldrick Robinson and half a season of Pierre Garçon and Leonard Hankerson, and the 49ers have a way better situation than the Washington football team did at that time. And, of course, Kyle Shanahan was with his dad, Mike Shanahan, building that offense. So I think they need to play him right away, let him take his lumps, and he's just going to get better. I mean, that's the way that everybody improves at anything is, trial and error. You make a mistake, you learn from it. That's the case with anything you're doing. Fantasy football, podcasting, doing the dishes, making food. I don't know. That's how you learn, is from making mistakes and then learning from them and then, trying not to repeat them and then getting better.
Yeah, this is a great subplot to this whole season, and it absolutely matters for fantasy football. And we can throw Chicago and Justin Fields in there too. And it echoes what happened all spring. And this is why sometimes I would get kind of vicious, I mean, for me at least, Evan, about this idea that they were going to take Mac Jones. Not that Mac Jones is a terrible player, but Trey Lance unlocks things in the Shanahan offense that we haven't seen since RG3. And in almost the exact same tone of voice, Evan, I don't know how often this offseason I've rattled off Josh Morgan and Leonard Hankerson and Fred Davis and Aldrick Robinson. And Griffin was also obviously more limited in taking the scheme to the field than Lance is going to be. So, it was like Robert Griffin III was typing with a keyboard that only had like half of the keys, and some of them were broken or didn't even work that well, and he still penned a great story. What can Trey Lance do with this offense? And like you said, it's a question of what will Kyle Shanahan do? When will he put Lance in the lineup? There's a very similar question in Chicago, and Matt Nagy, every time, just like Kyle Shanahan, every time they talk about it, they back off a little more. they back off a little more of the rhetoric that, well, the starter's going to start or they're the backup or not going to get first team reps. And in general, in these situations, you should bet on the under of the week that these guys are going to start. But like you said, if San Francisco's winning, we saw this with Kurt Warner and Eli Manning. It was like 17 years ago or 16 years ago. I don't know how long now. The point is that that's the only quarterback I can remember being replaced. I think maybe Alex Smith was also replaced once when he had a winning record by Colin Kaepernick. But again, like, what's the commonality here? I think the Giants wanted to see Eli Manning. I think that Kaepernick, San Francisco, again, they knew that he just added more to the offense. I'm super excited to see Trey Lance in this offense. And then, like you said, it's going to create higher efficiency for everybody. So it's going to be fun. And then we get to Justin Fields, and it's the same thing. Darnell Mooney already came up once in the show. But before we get carried away about Lance or Fields, I got to ask you, Evan, because everybody has heard my Kyle Pitts take a million times on the show already. I need to get some other perspectives. And you aren't as prone to get carried away as I am. So what are you telling over at Establish the Run? What are people hearing from y'all about Kyle Pitts?
Oh, man. I feel like I'm just like right in line with ADP. I unfortunately don't have a hot take or a cold take here at all. He is my tight end 4 behind, Kittle, Waller, and Kelsey. But, when you look at my overall rankings where I have him and where I value him, I mean, I got him in the Scott Fish Bowl, but I think that's the only draft where I've gotten him. And I took him pretty early in the Scott Fish Bowl, like maybe like at the 2-3 turn, if I recall correctly. So, but yeah, when it comes to just, like if you're drafting from a home league standpoint right now, and you were to look at where I have him, I have him as the tight end 4, but in the overall 150, I think he's like in the 40s. So
yeah.
That's why I also this is the sort of player that you can really get bullish on. You can really talk yourself into. He checks every box. Friedman laid it out perfectly on, I think it was your last on the couch or your second to last, to where he just checks every single box: athleticism, production. Watch the games. I mean, he can even block a little bit. He's got like 34-inch arms. He can just ward off people. He played on the line a lot at Florida, and so he got experience doing that. He wasn't like a full-time slot, wide out weapon at Florida. Like he would play on the line of scrimmage. So I mean, I don't know. I have not gotten to the super bullish or super bearish point with him yet. I know that you are very bullish.
Yeah, and it really was created because the first reaction to him was bearish, at least for this year, and that just seemed odd to me because he's exactly what we look for in fantasy football. It's just a question of when he's
just the floodgates open when they traded Julio too.
Right. And I don't feel like. Go ahead.
He went from a position where I think that he could have been like maybe like a 65 to 70% player, sort of like Hawkinson was early in his career, sharing time a little bit with Hayden Hurst, to being a guy that is absolutely going to be featured prominently in the passing offense. I mean, they don't have guys that can run deep routes besides Calvin Ridley. Their second best deep threat is going to be Kyle Pitts. I mean, it's not going to be Russell Gage or Hayden Hurst, or Lee Smith, who I think is going to end up playing a lot of snaps for them. I mean, they don't really have receivers. They don't have receivers other than Calvin Ridley. They got just a bunch of guys. So they're going to play a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets. And Kyle Pitts is going to be I think he's going to be like a 90% player.
Yeah, the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit for you. If you get in the Football Guys Players Championship, $500,000 grand prize, online drafts daily for $350. Get your shot at $500,000. You can get 3 teams for $1,000. Put all this great information into action. myffpc.com. You'll see the Football Guys Players Championship link up there in the upper left. Getting carried away, super bullish, Evan. Who is someone that you're super bullish on? Who's one of the players that everyone over at Established Run knows? If you don't take him, Evan's not going to be happy with you.
It's Tyler Lockett. And he's been the dude here for like the last 4 years, and it's been going pretty well. I remember Matt Harmon, really came out and banged the drum for him really early in his career. And then I think Lockett didn't go on to have the greatest season, but Harmon wound up, so it kind of looked like Harmon, where some people might look at it as like, oh, Harmon kind of missed on that one. No, it's just Harmon was a year early. And Tyler Lockett has been, the level of on-field rapport that he has built with, and the chemistry that he has built with Russell Wilson is just, I mean, it's like top 5 in the league, in terms of how much they have developed, just on-field trust. And that matters for quarterbacks as they begin to age, especially as they begin to age, I think. And Russell Wilson is, it was like 30, I think this is his age 33 season. Tyler Lockett is still on the right side of 30. Knock on wood, he has had a healthy training camp. I know that his inconsistencies last year were frustrating to many, but he also had 100 catches. And I think he's very likely to be more consistent this year. You just look at the nature of the passing offense in Seattle, and there are 2 target hogs, and then there's just a bunch of guys kind of competing for the scraps, and Chris Carson and maybe Dwayne Eskridge if he can get on the field, and Jared Everett. But DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett's target shares are so locked in, and Rich Rebar also has done a great job of showing that the way that Russell Wilson plays, he throws the football downfield and he throws the ball into the end zone. That's the way that he plays. And so those targets are very efficient, and they're going to be completed at a high rate. And Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 22 in the FFPC main event, I think that I have him a wide receiver 12. I have him 10 spots above his high stakes ADP.
Yeah. So if you get that early draft position, so you're picking the late 4th, early 5th,
yes.
You get a lot of questions like where, if you could pick your spot, right? So if you can take a top 3 running back, you run it back 2-3 turn, we could talk about that, but at the 4 or 5 turn, you can get Tyler Lockett and Darrell Henderson. So, it's not a bad spot. And I like zeroing in on Lockett. You mentioned the one thing with him is when the injury seal gets broken, he did have a little groin soreness. I don't think it's a big deal yet. When the injury seal gets broken, he plays through injuries, but he doesn't produce as well. That's part of what happened last year. But part of what happened is that the whole Seattle offense, like the air went out of the balloon. Okay. This is an offense, I think you got to get a piece of it. I can even see going into a draft, hey, let's just add this, Evan. In the 6th round, take Russell Wilson. Everyone loves to stack, right? Take Russell Wilson. I've said this on the show enough that regular listeners are probably say the words I want to say, but this could be an explosive offense, Shane Waldron, tempo, disguising, run versus pass. How much were the previous offenses holding Russell Wilson back? Could this be the first time we really get to see Russell Wilson? Halfway through the season last year, only Kyler Murray was scoring at the same rate as him. In typical scoring, he was a 30-point-a-game quarterback in the first half of this season.
Hey, at midseason last year, if you suggested that anyone else would win MVP other than Russell Wilson, like if you said that on Twitter, like you were going to get ratioed. He was balling out of control. But yeah, I mean, a confluence of events occurred. He threw a couple of interceptions. Their defense got better. Pete Carroll's like, hey, our defense is playing better. We're gonna scale back the pass volume. Tyler Lockett got hurt. It was a confluence of events that worked against that offense. But I'm with you, man. I think that this is a buy opportunity right now, especially because that created some recency bias and it made the guys a little bit cheaper. I think DK Metcalf is a bomb pick, like at the end of the 2nd round, where you can get him almost consistently at the end of the 2nd round. Just an absolute awesome pick. Tyler Lockett at the 4 or 5 turn. Russ, wherever you decide. Right. And then, Gerald Everett, I recently moved him up. So I don't like these tight ends after about I have Evan Ingram at tight end 14. And then a bunch of guys I don't want. Adam Troutman, Gronkowski, even Dallas Goedert is in there a little bit. It seems like they're keeping Zach Ertz. So I moved Everett, and I do have Goddard at tight end 13. But I moved Gerald Everett up to tight end 15 just because there is that possibility that he could have a big year. I'm not sure that I trust any of these guys after about tight end 15 to pop. It gets really bad. The drop off at tight end gets really, really bad in that range.
Yeah, the only other guy I liked was Blake Jarwin, but now
Okay,
there's this
yeah.
stuff with Dalton Schultz, and Schultz is an adequate player. He's a competent player. Jarwin can add a lot more to those targets, but if they really are splitting targets, I think they may split snaps, but Jarwin should get a lot more targets per snap, routes per snap than Schultz, at least if the Cowboys are coaching rationally. Plus, Cowboys should be passing a lot. Let me ask you about that, because this is a real, what's the word I can look for? Kind of gives you the willies thinking about Dallas right now. This should be one of the best offenses in the league. It should be a key to winning your league. First 6,000-yard passer, who knows? But you can't ignore what's going on with Prescott. What do we do here? Do we hedge it? Do you just get cute in a few drafts, build as if the Cowboys are going to be fine, but stay away in other drafts? Do you ignore it? Do you stay away? What's your take here?
Oh, it's a tough one. It's a real tough one because, I mean, the reports, just the national reports, which obviously are driven by Jerry Jones, they have been pretty positive. And I think even some of the doctors that are on Twitter have been pretty optimistic about him. But when you kind of zoom out, and I'm not even remotely anything close to a doctor, and I listen to Dr. Gene, but when you zoom out, he had 2 surgeries on his ankle, and then there was some speculation that compensation for the ankle may have contributed to the arm injury, and then he needed 2 MRIs on the arm injury. So I don't know. It's really tough. I haven't been taking Dak Prescott. I'll definitely mix in, CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup. But I really haven't been taking any Dak. And last year I was really big on the Cowboy stacks, and man, that was looking hot for a month.
Right?
Yeah. But I'm not doing those this year out of I guess an abundance of caution. I hope I'm wrong because I love Dak Prescott. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong too. I think in the Draft Sharks Invitational, I ended up taking Prescott in the 6th and then Amari Cooper Prescott in the 2nd. It was super flex, and Cooper in the 6th. That's kind of my, what if there's much ado about nothing? But I wanted to take Russell Wilson instead of Prescott in that draft. I think it was Jack Miller that was picking right after me, Evan. And I said, can we just trade quarterbacks? And he's like, sure. He's like, Wilson right after me. I really would have rather had Wilson. Sometimes it's only making the pick that gives you the clarity. When you're on the clock, you don't have it. And then after you make the pick, oh, that was the wrong pick. And the thing about Prescott, and anything's possible, but you just have to look, and like you said, I'm not a doctor either. And Dr. Gene is who we would refer to here. But something's not right. The best story you can tell is he's the franchise. This muscle in his armpit didn't feel right. So they're just taking it easy and being hyper conservative because of how important he is. But it's much more Occam's razor sensible to say, no, something's wrong. And they're basically resting it as long as they can, ramping up slowly to not endanger aggravating it, and then restarting the clock with this injury. But he's not, like someone in the chat room said, Gil Brandt, who's, man, a true Mac daddy of this whole football world that we're in, said he's not going to be 100%. And that's just sensible to me. He's not going to be 100% this year. Now, how much is that going to affect his numbers? How much is that going to affect the team? How much is that going to affect everyone else's numbers? It's impossible to overlook this. I can't think of something similar, but usually these situations end up so that when we watch him play, we say, yeah, you can see where he can't make the throws that he normally would be able to make. There's so many. It's just, I can't believe we're only going to get an hour here with Evan. There's so many things we could talk about. I guess I'll throw us all the way back, Evan, since I've got you here, to the 30,000-foot view, and just what's an angle, or how are you advising people as they approach the landscape this year in fantasy drafts?
I would just say, in terms of general draft approach, what the sort of strategy that I have come to really believe in is, you don't have to sit down and make, your own top 300. You can kind of use somebody else's and, as a blueprint, and move guys up, that you like more, and build in your own personal preferences. But I do think you need to make it like a not an absolute top 25, but a top 25 that you feel really good about. which I think you can. I think you
Mm-hmm.
absolutely can. And then you sort of stay true to that top 25 with your first two picks. And then whatever you emerge from in the first two rounds, you sort of let that dictate the rest of your draft. Hey, I got Travis Kelce at number 9 overall. Now I'm in the third round, and I'm in the late third, and Patrick Mahomes this year. I'm probably going to be more likely to draft Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Or you start out, wide receiver, and you could definitely be, or let's say you start out with you take Tyreek Hill real early. Then I think you would be more likely to take like a Joe Mixon or a Najee Harris when it comes back to you at the end of the second round, and then follow that up with another like big time wide receiver, because you have got a running back that you can count on that is projected for like 350 touches. That sort of thing. Just utilizing, building like a rock solid top 25. Kind of sticking to it, and you can veer from it if you wish, of course, when you're on the board, and you see who's left, and you see who the guy in front of you drafted in the first round, et cetera, et cetera. But building that top 25 and then allowing that to steer the rest of your draft. And even if you start wide receiver, like you're drafting on at the 12 and 13, I wouldn't be afraid to keep hammering wide receivers, especially if you're in a league that's full PPR, where you start 3 wide receivers, and you might have 1 or 2 flexes. Keep filling out those spots with wide receivers. And then, like we talked about before, you might be able to get Darrell Henderson in the 4th or 5th round, and all of a sudden you have like an underrated RB1, and you filled a bunch of high value slots with high value receivers.
I love it. Flexibility.
Yes.
I just did the draft day game plan. I just released it on Friday at Footballguys. And in the draft day game plan, this article I do every year, this kind of collects up all my thoughts, merging player evaluation, what's been going on, and draft strategy. And the key is to be flexible. So I give you 5 or 6 options at quarterback and a rough round range. And you just start, like Evan said, well, you get off with out of the blocks with your highest confidence players. Your top 25 you're not playing games. I mean, of course, Travis Kelce's in there, Darren Waller are in there because of position scarcity at tight end. But with the exception of that, you're really ranking them by the confidence you have in the player and the situation. And don't get too cute trying to talk yourself into, like in years past, you have to start running back, or start with no running backs or whatever. Of course, I like Kyle Pitts a lot, so I might move Kelce and Waller down a little bit, just because I know I'm probably not taking Kyle Pitts unless it's high in premium. But then that shapes your draft after that. And I think that's a really, really, really good advice. I'll give you some other good advice. Join the footballguys.com daily update email list. It's free. You get takes from Joe Bryant, myself, Cecil Lammy, links, free articles sometimes, even if you're not a subscriber, and a lot of things that you need to know. It's absolutely up your fantasy football IQ. Join.footballguys.com/couch and get on that email update list. I promise you'll be happy. With that, we attack everything that you and everybody in the fantasy football world needs to know. Let's go back to your top 25, Evan. And you can take either or from this question, okay? Mm-hmm. Give me either a player that is in your top 25 that probably is not in everyone else's top 25, or somebody that is in everyone else's top 25 that probably isn't in yours.
Ooh, this is a good one. Well, I have noticed just looking at constantly comparing my rankings against ADP to see where I differ, that I'm considerably higher on Aaron Jones than ADP, but he wouldn't answer your question. But a guy that would answer it would be, and this is kind of surprising, Keenan Allen, who I have as number 24 overall. He's a little bit lower. He's not in the top 25 when you look at high stakes ADP. He's more toward number 30. And let me see some guys that are in front of him. Well, Justin Jefferson is like clearly in front of him. But you'll see other receivers like Mike Evans from time to time will slip in ahead of him. Allen Robinson is clearly ahead of him. And I have him above those guys. And, I mean, he's got 97 catches or more in 4 straight years. You know, he has kind of put to rest the injury narrative from early in his career. He showed incredible chemistry out the gate. I mean, Chargers didn't even want Justin Herbert to start. And incredible chemistry from day one. I mean, getting, peppered with targets, double-digit targets on a weekly basis from Justin Herbert. And that kind of goes back to when Justin Herbert played at Oregon. I mean, the knock on him was he threw too many short passes and wasn't aggressive going downfield. My sense is that was a product of the Oregon offense, number one, and also the talent at Oregon. When was the last time an Oregon wide receiver did anything in the NFL? I mean, seriously, can you name it?
I can't even think of anybody. The first name that came out is like Colt Lyre. Like, wasn't even a receiver. I'm just saying that when I'm searching my name for Oregon pass catchers that made an impact.
The Vikings drafted a guy. I want to say his name was Mitchell from Oregon a couple years ago, but he hasn't done anything. But Keenan Allen, one of the best route runners in the NFL, he still is on the right side of 30. I mean, his efficiency numbers weren't great last year, but he's such a comfortable target and an absolute beast in PPR. And I don't see that changing. I mean, he's going to catch a ton of balls like this year, like he always does. And to me, he's one of those high confidence picks that I think belongs in the top 25.
Yeah, absolutely. He had 100 catches last year, even though he missed 2 games and most of 2 other games. So he basically had like 13 games and a quarter. He had 100 catches. The chemistry's there. You laid that out really well with Justin Herbert too. There's this kind of algebra we can do when we watch players go from college to the pros, solving for X, and how much of what we saw on their tape was the scheme, how much of it was their innate abilities, and then of course you have different coaches. Joe Lombardi's name comes up here. Not exactly one that's brought up in positive tones, but you hope that he learned something from Sean Payton. And then there's this whole tension between Lombardi saying, well, Mike Williams is the X. That's the Michael Thomas position. It's going to be a Saint-style offense. He's the guy I'd bet on. But Justin Herbert's going to bet on Keenan Allen. Going to bet on him to get open.
Because Keenan Allen is going to be open. And Mike Williams, I mean, I kind of like Mike Williams this year. And I haven't liked him in past years. I do kind of like him this year. But he's not going to be open because that's not what Mike Williams does. And Keenan Allen's going to be open.
Yeah. And it's going to be exciting to see what Herbert can do also with a good offensive line. For the first time I can ever remember, Evan, we can say the Chargers have a good offensive line. Exciting. Lots of exciting things.
And the knock against the Chargers, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Please do.
All right. The knock against the Chargers this year, and I think it's fair, is that the Chargers just ran more plays than any team in the NFL last year, and they're going to regress in terms of plays run. But, they had a terrible offensive line last year. All of a sudden, they have a good offensive line. So that's going to help them compensate, I think, for a loss of play volume. And I think it's kind of overthinking to be so worried about this, so consumed by the play volume. I mean, this kid, Justin Herbert, is a baller, man. I mean, I say it too much, but, he's out there. He's got acne. Yeah. He's lighting up the NFL, okay? He wins the Offensive Rookie of the Year with acne. And and also I think you can put some trust in Brandon Staley to make it, a solid choice on Joe Lombardi, or at least to have his hand in things offensively. He was absolutely brilliant last year, building the Rams defense, and really only had two, maybe 3 big time players on defense, but then had them like elevate the play of the other 8. And he was so impressive. I do have I have faith in him that he made a good selection in Joe Lombardi.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpeel. I think in a show I did recently, it was Alan. It was the RotoWire show. Alan Seslowski. Sorry if I said your last name incorrect, Alan. He asked me about something I mentioned once. I think it was with relation to Herbert. I don't remember. See, I come up with a phrase and then I can't even remember how I put it, but it's like a useful obliviousness. And it goes along with what you said about the acne. I used to like to say about Colt McCoy, like, when he hits puberty, he's going to be a heck of a quarterback, but it really is true for Herbert, because you can see that he's at the very beginning of that arc of, just his body, his soul, his life, like maturing. And it just came so naturally to him, in part because he didn't understand how difficult what he was doing was. You mentioned Brandon Staley. I echo this again. I just want to put it out there more than once. The little bit I've seen, Evan, and I know it's just clips and things like that, I get a really good vibe from Brandon Staley. I think that he is the right kind of coach for the 2021 NFL. He's energetic, he's positive, he's passionate, he's connecting with his players. He was a quarterback too. You mentioned him, so it isn't that crazy to think about him at least overseeing the offense and maybe being willing to give some input if things are going awry. And I feel like, since we're bringing up the Chargers, I have to mention Donald Parham, just because he's having a good camp. And Jared Cook, how often do we let ourselves get talked into some veteran in the December of their career blocking some ascendant player, and then by week 4 or 5, the ascendant player showing that they're actually the player to target? So just remember, that's an early season waiver wire speed dial, Donald Parham. You mentioned Aaron Jones. And I'm going to confess.
I have a little nugget about Parham. So
yes,
Gilbert Manzano, who covers the Chargers for, I believe, is the Orange County Register, maybe.
Yeah.
I DM'd him like around free agency, because the Chargers had not yet signed Jared Cook at that point, and I was like, "Hey, man, love your work. You do a great job covering the Chargers. Could Donald Parham get this gig?" And he was skeptical at the time.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of reinforced when the Chargers signed Jared Cook. Okay, so we didn't talk, for several months. And then at the start of training camp, he sent me a story that he did about Donald Parham. And he was like, "Yo, man, I take back what I said in March or whatever it was. Donald Parham has a real chance to have a real big part of the offense, or to have a real big role in the offense." So that was promising. And, I'm doing a main event FFPC tonight, and he is a sweet, like, tight end 3, isn't he? I mean, he's got a big time ceiling. He's like 6'9". He's got like 35-inch arms. I mean, he is like a skinny Jonathan Ogden. Right. He's like, and he catches everything. I mean, watching him in the XFL, he was the best player in the league. And I think he belongs, in the NFL. And I hope that he carves out that role that Gilbert seems to think that he could.
Yeah, it's great whenever, but staying in touch with beat writers. There's a few beat writers, Evan, that I'll show up in my DMs just to say, "Yeah, hey, remember we talked about this player? Exactly what you said. Here's a story that I wrote about him, if you want to know what I think about them right now." And really quick, because you mentioned the FFPC main event, no one wants to hear about our teams. But I'm not sure when I'm going to do my main event team. I'm going to try to do it. I was thinking about doing it at a time whenever I can actually live broadcast it, but then I'll probably mess myself up and get lost or something. But what I was curious about is, you look at some of these contests, these high stakes contests, and more of our listeners, more and more of our great audience are doing these contests. Do you think there's any advantage to drafting early in the window, or drafting late in the window, or doing a slow draft, or doing a draft that is done in real time with a clock? What are your thoughts as somebody, say they go and sign up for the FFPC main event right now? Like, what do you think? When should I do it? What kind of draft should I pick?
It's a really good question, and it's actually a question that it's kind of polarizing. Like, I've talked about drafting early on Twitter before, and like I got a lot of negative feedback. Like, people think that you're an idiot if you draft early. I mean, there's a lot of people that think that. But I think it's, we went back to, getting like live reps at anything is so valuable. I mean, just from getting reps, and you don't have to play in a $1,900 buy-in to get reps. Okay. You probably shouldn't be playing in the $1,900 buy-in to get reps. Right. But doing drafts, doing underdog, whatever drafts you can get your hands on, and ideally with a little bit on the line, because you don't want people jumping out, and drafting drafting multiple kickers, and in just like a routine mock that you could find on the internet. I mean, I think that you should try to look for for games that have a little bit of stakes in them, just so that you know that your opponents are serious. But getting reps and then finishing off with a main event draft, I think is a good process. But I'm going to do personally. I already did one FFPC main event. It was on, I think, the second night that they were available. I'm doing one tonight, and then I'm going to do, I think, two more really late in the process. So I like to spread it around personally, but drafting early is not a bad thing. And I think that everybody needs to understand that because it's just like anything else. The more that you do it, the more you're going to have confidence, the more you're going to have a feel for where guys are going in drafts, and it helps you more than just looking at an ADP board. I mean, because it's real life stuff, and I think that's, again, the only way to get better at almost anything is to just do it, make your mistakes. You'll build confidence and you'll get better. Yeah,
this is great. This is a great theme, Evan. You're going to start a personal growth podcast or something. This is going to be self-help with Evan Silva. Yeah. It's just embrace failure or embrace the possibility of failure, because that's how you learn. And you're absolutely right about the reps. I'm down here in Louisiana now, so hopefully we'll get DFS and pay fantasy football going again. So I don't get the reps with like MFL 10s. I used to do an MFL 10 a day.
Oh, yeah, so did I.
Just because of the reps, like you said, and you try things out and you think, oh, I think I'm going to get one of these three options with 15 picks between this pick and my next pick. And then you find out, nope, that's not going to work. And then you go back to the drawing board. And by the time you get to those drafts at the end, let me ask you about that early draft though. Have you gone back and looked at it?
Yeah.
So how does it make you feel now going back and look at it?
Well, I mean, I like it. We started, we had the 101, and we started with Christian McCaffrey, and then wound up like just hammering wide receivers for 4 rounds. And then we reached in the 6th, 7th, a point where it was not going to come back to us for, 24 picks or whatever.
Right.
And we looked at the tight ends. We didn't have any tight ends. And we were like, we have to take 2 tight ends right now because, first of all, it's going to hurt the rest of the room. And, we were getting to that Troutman range, that it was just on the horizon. There's no way that Robert Tonyan and Irv Smith were going to make it back to us. So we took Robert Tonyan and Irv Smith. I kind of wanted Higbee and Tonyan, but Higbee went 1 pick before us to another Established the Run subscriber or listener.
Nice.
And so we got sniped by him. So thanks. Shout out to Raider Kev for taking our pick there. But we wound up taking Tonyan and Irv Smith, and we had to do it. I mean, if you look at the cliff drop, bums were starting to go after that.
Right.
And we did not want to get into a situation where we had to lean on Jared Cook or something as our tight end starter. So, and I really like Irv Smith this year. I think that, ever since Mike Zimmer made those comments earlier that his role isn't going to change just because we lost Rudolph, I'm not buying that. I do kind of like Tyler Conklin, and I think he's going to do a good job in that number 2 tight end role. But I think Irv Smith is going to have a big role in the passing offense if something happens to Jefferson or Thielen. Look TF out for Irv Smith. And then Tonyan, I mean, his level of efficiency with Aaron Rodgers was insane. He had an 89% catch rate. And, I mean, I absolutely think he can score double-digit touchdowns again. Why would he not get more targets this year than he did last year? It's not like they went out and really – I mean, they brought in Randall Cobb. They drafted Amari Rodgers, although it seems like he's looking at, sort of a redshirt year potentially. But they really didn't do a whole lot to upgrade that pass catcher core again. So I expect Robert Tonyan's targets to absolutely rise and for him to continue to be a big-time asset in the end zone. I don't know. Where are you at on Irv Smith right now?
I think you laid out the case for Irv perfectly. I just took him in the Guillotine League as my same thing, Evan, except it's an 18-team league. But it's similar in so much that you don't want to get caught on the other side of the cliff. And I was thinking it was the 6-7 turn. I also had the first overall pick. And I think that you laid out the case well where he's an ascendant player. He's on the upside slope of his career arc. and there's the injury upside there. And I've come around on him too after I like Tyler Conklin. And when Mike Zimmer said that, and why should we be listening to Mike Zimmer about the offense? I don't know. Maybe that was not
good point.
Right. But I definitely, it gave me a little bit of pause because of the way they were used last year at the end of the year. It basically matched what Zimmer said. So I said, well, that's even more evidence. But Irv Smith can change that. Remember that, folks. Again, we look at these preseason snap counts and usage. The players are going to be the final arbiters of what really happens. Talent is going to create opportunity, or failure is going to extinguish opportunity. And Irv Smith sure seems like, and he's young, going into his third year. One of the things I flirted with, I think I did this for a while in the Apex
and he came
draft.
into the league real young,
yeah, like at 20. One of the I think I did it for a while in our Apex draft, and I got off of it. But Evan, one of these years, I want to do a draft where I only take players who've been in the league, say, for 4 or maybe max 5 years, and that's it. And maybe even do one more filter, like only players that are in, say, the top half of the league offenses. Just real simple filters, and just see how it goes. Like you said, make mistakes, experiment, see what happens. Because sometimes I think if you just limited your view to those players on that upslope slide of their career, or at least players that are in offenses that have growth potential, again, the upslope side, then you're probably going to make out better overall than when you try to take those older players or players that are in offenses where they'll be the best player in the offense. Anyway, before I delve into that, and before we get closer to off the rails, I do want to remind people about the Footballguys Draft Dominator app. It's like having us look over your shoulder when you draft. And it's certainly the best way, even if you're not a subscriber, to get the brain power Footballguys on your side. Footballguys.com/draft-dominator-mobile. Check that out. I want to go back to something you said. First of all, I want to say, if Adam Traubman's listening, we still like Adam Traubman as a football player. It's great. He's a pride of the University of Dayton. It's just funny because you're right. But you're right, though. I think that
I don't want him as my starter.
Exactly. Exactly.
And there does reach a point in the draft where it's like, oh my God, like I might have to leave this draft with Adam Traubman as my starter.
Exactly. It's perfect. No, and that's why I wanted to say, hey, we're not saying he's a bad player, but if you go in week 1 and Traubman and watch him score 2 touchdowns in week 1 now, Evan, but chances are you're going to be in that waiver wire trying to find anything that sticks. And there are Robert Tonyan's that come along during the season, but not every single year. You mentioned we and us when you're talking about that FFPC draft. So what advice can you give to people that are collaborating, that are co-managers of a fantasy team? Because usually, hey, you have yourself to answer to and yourself to hold accountable. How does it work when you have to make decisions with another person?
I love it. I absolutely love it. There's a team element to it when a dude falls to you and you're like you got the Zoom call and then you got the draft room and your guys fall to you. You're like, yeah, like it's awesome. And I don't know. I've really gotten into drafting with other people. And sometimes like I don't know. One time I mentioned that I was like drafting with other people and they're like, well, you're like Evan Silva. You should be drafting by yourself. And I was like I don't care about that, like I want to enjoy this with other people. And especially when you're paying up $1,900 and you're paying 4 leagues, like you should probably, spread out the investments there a little bit. But I don't know. It's the camaraderie. I mean, and it's just so fun when, you're 6 picks away from your pick. And you're like, all right, we need DK Metcalf to get to us. Come on, baby, and then like David Montgomery goes, and you're like, yes, and then I love it. I love drafting with other people. It's like my favorite thing to do.
That's great. I'd love that turned into a big endorsement because it's like a marriage or any other relationship. It can go bad, right? When there's failure, it's just like a team, right? When there's failure, then you get into finger pointing. I told you that we shouldn't take him, or even when you're on the clock and someone has to take the L. Like, what do you do whenever there's an honest difference of opinion and you're on the clock and someone has to take the L?
Yeah, that's it can be tough. But what you do is then you essentially give that guy or gal or whatever the next pick. I mean, you defer to them at the next pick. You know what I mean? There's it's teamwork, and I mean
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it with like random guys, but I do it with like my buddies or coworkers or whatever, to the point where there's gonna be some give and take there, and you're gonna defer when you get the guy you want. It's your time to defer, maybe even for the next 2 picks.
Right. No, that's perfect. Just like we learned in kindergarten, take turns. Take turns.
Right.
Okay. It could be your turn. That's perfect. And I, in the background, I think there is, like you said, camaraderie right off the bat. As long as there's a good feeling between the two people and you're coming at it, knowing that it's based on some sort of friendship or some sort of good faith and mutual trust. It's good.
Yeah.
Although it makes me think, Evan, about like a reality show now where we should do like a quote unquote experts fantasy league where we put together odd couples. Like we put 2 people together that we know are not going to be able to get along. Maybe people that even had like public feuds in the past. That's for another time. Now we're to like the last 10 minutes. And by the way, folks, Evan Silva at Evan Silva established the run and all the other good things that come from there. But for off the rails, Evan, I just noticed you got your Chicago Cubs hat on. Now, are you Chicago born and bred?
No. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and then moved to St. Louis for a while, and now have been in Chicago for like 15 years. I didn't really care at all about any sporting events or Chicago sports at all until I had my daughter, and we live like right down the street from Wrigleyville.
Oh,
and I mean, she is just a huge Cubs fan. So now I have to be a Cubs fan. Well, I'm not really a fan. Actually, I'm definitely not a fan after what they just did. Like, I'm pissed about it.
You think it's bad? You try being a Pirates fan, okay? This is the plan every year if you're a Pirates fan, anyway.
True. No, fair point. But I mean, I love living in this area, but it's all about the daughter. The daughter is a huge Cubs fan, loves to go to the games. Always has like her pink, always wearing a pink Cubs shirt all the time. So that it's a big part of what we do. We went to, I don't know, 5 games this year, and it was a blast.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I went to a couple of games this year. My 8-year-old, my stepson Noah, is really getting into baseball. He's a catcher, and we went to a Tigers game. We actually went to a Tigers game when there was very limited admission, so he got 3 balls. He got 3 regulation baseballs.
Dude, that is awesome.
I know. We tried to tell him like that's impossible.
Yes,
that's impossible.
Yes.
And then we went to a Padres game. They've got some good stuff going on there. But I wanted to ask you, since you brought it up, then what's the coolest thing about going to Wrigley? I've been to Wrigley once. Thankfully, I got there once for a Cubs Pirates game. What's the coolest thing about going to Wrigley Field?
When we go, we try to get good tickets, and we try to sit like close to an area where we can get a ball. And I had the same exact experience as you. It was Eric Young. I want to say I think it was against the D-backs or something. I can't remember. Eric Young, EY was his nickname. I think he played for the Rockies, and he was the first base coach. And we were yelling EY, and he came over and he gave my daughter a couple of balls, sitting down the first baseline. So that's really cool, I think, to just kind of splurge every now and again and go get some great tickets, and get the daughter yelling EY, and then and then she gets a baseball. It's a great experience.
It's exciting too. I remember when for the Padres game, we got some good tickets because, again, we're going to go to 1 or 2 baseball games a year, and everyone was yelling for Manny Machado, and he turned around and acknowledged everyone. We're like, yeah, he acknowledged we exist because
he will do that. Actually, I went to a game with Nick Menzio, my cousin, not last year because there were no games, but the year before, and we were yelling down to Machado, and he turned around. So he'll definitely get a little bit involved, no doubt.
It's fun. Baseball games are fun. I'm going to turn off the audience right now when I say this. My true first love in sporting events was March Madness. But my first love, as far as a team, was the Pittsburgh Pirates that I brought up. I used to listen to the games on the radio. I would keep score at home. I had a little notebook that I would erase, like when someone hit a home run or get an RBI, I would erase it and update it, And part of the reason I'm here today doing this right now with you is because I thought I wanted to be the play-by-play announcer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But baseball games are fun because there's so much downtime, and there's so much things that fill that downtime. It's a full-on experience, and that's really awesome. I mean, that's just so heartwarming, and I think it shows a lot about where your heart is with your daughter. So since we're talking Chicago, and you've been there for 15 years now, and I've got to say this because I'm in New Orleans. In New Orleans, we have a saying, let's get lunch and talk about dinner. Like, we're always thinking about food, always thinking about food. And I think in the on the couch, the one that I can't remember who it was that did it now off the top of my head. Was it Pure Hoop? I think it was Pure Hoop. I think it was Jack Perkins. I'm sorry if I got that wrong because my brain is Swiss cheese. You're actually, because you just started eating. I think you just started that phrase back when the couch started. You're eating in that picture behind us right now on YouTube.
Exactly.
What is the best thing to get to eat in Chicago?
Oh man. The stock answer is the deep dish pizza. But once you've eaten that, 15 times, and then you start to put on like 20 pounds, then you start, I can't really eat this stuff anymore. And it's great. It really is. It really is good. But I like to go to the deep dish pizza places and get their thin crust, which, it's really good too. And people don't really think, oh, let's go to Giordano's and get like the thin crust. But I mean, it's really good. I don't know. I guess that will be my answer.
Yeah, no, it's good. Actually, gives me an opportunity to say that Home Run Inn frozen pizza is actually a good frozen pizza. There's actually a good frozen pizza out there, folks.
Well, I didn't even know this until I moved to Chicago. That I always thought of Home Run Inn as just a frozen pizza place, but there are actual Home Run Inns. And they've got like breweries in them, and they're big places, and they've got excellent pizza, and and you can eat. They've got other good stuff too on the menu. But that is an actual place. I always thought it was just a frozen pizza that you would pick up at the supermarket. But no, they have like live Home Run Inn pizza places all throughout the city, and it's an excellent place.
Yeah, I got one in Midway Airport, I think, the last time I passed through there. So yes, so this is this will get us ready for what are we going to have for dinner. We're thinking about, but really, I invite, because again, we're so food obsessed down here in New Orleans. Anybody and everybody, I'll give you recommendations about whatever you want. It's one of the things I want to give eating recommendations more than fantasy football recommendations since I've moved to New Orleans. But we're always eating the Evan Silva with Establish the Run. It's a great tradition, Evan. I always enjoy the time that we get to spend together. It's something I circle on the calendar. We've both been doing this for a long time, and it's still just as fresh and new every single off season. Still just as engrossing and exciting. And I guess I'll give you a chance to, real quick, if people aren't familiar with Establish the Run, like tell them why they need to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for serious fantasy players, and if you like to play year round, if you're into sports betting, we are continuously adding sports betting content. We have rankings for like top 300 rankings for every style of fantasy. Whether it be two quarterback super flex or high stakes or underdog, or we've got rankings situated for each format. We do intense in-season DFS coverage, and prop betting has become really, really big. Adam Levitan he destroyed prop betting for NBA, and now he's got 41 season-long props already bet for and posted for the NFL. So it's just, if you're serious about this stuff, I think that we have invaluable information, and we're continuing to add, contributors and trying to improve our content, really every day. And I think that we're accomplishing a lot of our goals, and I think that people that do sign up, I think they have a very enjoyable experience because our retention rate has been really, really high. Yeah, come check it out. EstablishTheRun.com, @EstablishTheRun on Twitter, and I think that you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I can say for sure, and it comes through in your work and the work of the people that work with you. We care. We want to do a good job, and we're always improving. Again, that's the theme. We sometimes make mistakes, but we go back to the drawing board. We get better, and you do too. And also, I love Establish the Run, the double entendre, because it's Establish the Run, haha. But we're going to establish that run, the run that you're going to make through your league. It's always fun to make that run with Evan Silva, and you folks out there always. It's getting there. It's draft season. Good luck and stay classy.